Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Dark Side of the Ring Season 7, Episode 1 was about the birth of TNA and the rise of Jeff Jarrett. Welcome to PJ's Chris TV here. We will be breaking down Dark Side of the Ring's first episode of Season 7, which featured the story of Jeff Jarrett and, excuse me, him founding TNA, all the struggles where it talks about DIXIE and Karen Angle, now Karen Jarrett. A lot to talk about from these first two episodes. The first so it was on Vice TV, and disclaimer, I want to quickly start off with fuck YouTube TV for not having Vice TV. I just want to say that out there. I had to go through a heinous to go watch these first two episodes. Well, not the first two episodes. That one so usually Dark Side of the Ring's an hour, and it's from like 9 to 10. And for this first episode, they did a two-parter, which was from 9 to 10 was the first episode, and from uh 10 to 11 was part 2, the second episode. And next week, Thursday, or excuse me, Tuesday, at 9 o'clock again on Vice, will be part 3 of Dark Side of the Ring, TNA and Jeff Jarrett. There is a lot to talk about. I'm somebody that has watched TNA since 2009, around that year's lockdown, and I went back, watched a lot of the stuff, so I'm very, very familiar with this brand. Um, Not too familiar from like 2002, from like 2004, but from like '06, a little bit of '05 till '09, I knew a lot growing up. And when they announced that they were doing this originally, I was very excited because I knew we were going to hear some people say some stuff and talk about a lot of stuff that have never been publicly said. You know, Karen Jarrett being a huge example of that. And I think it was very cool to hear her story and hear her side. Obviously, they probably contacted Kurt, probably wanted nothing to do with this. I'm not even surprised. But a lot of this and that second episode focused a lot on him. Um, because when TNA got Kurt Angle, like Jeff Jarrett said, he went and told Bob Carter, Dixie Carter's dad, "So sell me on him." And he said, you want a wrestler that's all about TNA, total nonstop action? Kurt Angle is going to be a game changer." And he was right. I mean, ultimately, Kurt Angle had his better career in TNA, and it was a huge game changer for TNA. But that obviously came with a lot, which we'll talk about there in a second. We didn't hear from Dixie. Dixie wasn't on the show. I did hear Jeff Jarrett talk on Chris Van Fleet and Ariel Hawani, where she reached out to Dixie. She didn't really say yes, but she also, or say no, excuse me, but she also didn't say yes. I just assumed she didn't want to be a part of it. Which sucks because a lot of it was talking negative and shitting on her, which I'm gonna get into her in a second because I am not a Dixie Carter fan, and a lot of this was kind of revealing. Um, so we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about a lot of the things that I've seen from podcasters, heard from podcasters over the last few days since they've been doing media. Jeff Jarrett, Scott D'Amore, and some other people. But I wanted to start off with the birth of, not the birth of TNA, but like the story of Jeff Jarrett, because TNA, there's a lot that I want to talk about. But I want to talk about kind of Jeff Jarrett's the birth of TNA. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about Jeff Jarrett. Let's do that. I think they did a great job. Jeff Jarrett did a great job of telling his personal story. Especially with his father, who was a legendary wrestling promoter, and his grandmother. Um, and it was a lot of, for us young, for myself, being a younger fan, I liked seeing, how a lot of these old school veterans got into the business. And especially when you hear like, a Von Erich or a Jarrett who, you know, maybe back in the day, they were starting off in some territories that I don't know if were as popular, but they're definitely not as talked about in today's world. Like, if you know, old school territory like the NWA, because it's still around, you don't really hear much of, like, you know, Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain unless you listen to his podcast, or like the AWA, um, you know, Memphis. Like, if you're an old school wrestling fan, you know that. But you know, myself and people around my age probably aren't familiar with that. So they did a good job of telling Jeff Jarrett's, you know, his father, telling his story as well. And you know, it's interesting when we get to when we talk about the birth of TNA here. I understood Jeff's vision when he talked about it, because it was right after, you know, WCW got sold to WWE in 2001. And you know, Jeff Jarrett kind of had been blacklisted by WWE because, you know, he didn't want to drop that intercontinental. He told Vince McMahon, if I'm dropping that intercontinental title to China, you better fucking pay me. You know, and you know, Vince McMahon ended up paying Jeff Jarrett and, you know, doing good business with you, but he dropped that intercontinental championship to China before he in 2001, before, I believe it was 2001, before he started TNA in 2002. And it was, I can't imagine where Jeff Jarrett was at that place at that time. You know, obviously we see him talk about it and we see it unfold, but it's like, it's not like Tony Khan now, where okay, he has a billionaire father, right, that will back him up on all these amounts of money and yada yada. You know, AEW's essentially, in my opinion, as a tax write off for the Khans. They don't give a fuck. They're loaded. Jeff Jarrett, he had to start this thing up from the ground up, you know, with his father Jerry, because Vince McMahon just had bought his competition. ECW wasn't around at that time, and it was like, who is he gonna get? How is he gonna even compete with WWE? And I don't think that was, when I watched when I look at this, I don't think that was initially the goal. I think it was a place where just they wanted people to work. But on the other hand, people can say that TNA wasn't WWE light all they want. Oh, yes, the fuck it was. Yes, the fuck it was. TNA from 2004 to, well, you had the X Division. I would say from TNA, from maybe 2000 and the last 2 years of Jeff Jarrett being there was WWE. It felt so WWE light. Go back and watch the footage. I could spend a good amount of time talking about that, but we're gonna keep it on the subject, because he's starting this company. It gets going. I liked how they did that. You know, they had a big financial backer in TNA. You know, the original investor, it was like Health South. It was a massive, some scandal that it almost killed the promotion after, you know, after it launched. And they without, you know, really quickly, they pulled their fundings. So the guy went up to Jeff Jarrett and said, we got to pull your funding. And he thought TNA was fold, until he met Panda Energy, led by the one and only DIXIE motherfucking Carter. Oh boy. And then we see how that goes from there. So let's talk about, let's talk about Jeff Jarrett's personal history a little bit more before we really deep dive into the TNA aspect of what I saw on Dark Side of the Ring this past Tuesday. So Jeff Jarrett, it was an emotional watch, you know, when he talks about his wife, you know, watching her go through what she went through, because you can see the other wrestlers, you know, Vince Russo, or the one producer, I forget his name, but he was getting really choked up when he was talking about Jeff Jarrett. Him seeing Jeff Jarrett taking care of her, and just he couldn't do anything about it. And he knows that because Jeff Jarrett talked about how when Jeff Jarrett's first wife got her second diagnosis, they had to go um move the production meetings to Jeff Jarrett's house. Scott D'Amore is the one that said that. And Scott D'Amore, Vince Russo, all these people would be there and they would see the way that Jeff would take care of his wife. And it was very emotional seeing Vince Russo get choked up. He talked about, he knew her, and he's never seen her like that. She was an athlete. She took care of herself. Um, and then Scott Steiner he walked out. He simply walked out. He was describing her, she was a beautiful woman. She was smart, caring, a good mother. So clearly, Jeff Jarrett's first wife, Jill, had a big impact on not just Jeff, but the boys. Essentially, she's described as a very caring, good woman, and Jeff's peers. You could see it in Jeff's peers. In this Dark Side of the Ring, they were very emotional. So that was definitely a tear dropping watch right there. And then they all, again, just Jeff Jarrett balancing wrestling while he's taking care of his family with three daughters, and watching his wife essentially dying right in front of him, and again, nothing he could do. Um, I command Jeff Jarrett for reliving that part of his life. Um, And he said something in, I think it was Busted Open, where they were like, "Why did you decide to do Dark Side of the Ring?" Because I could see the old school fan, like Bully Ray talks about. He doesn't watch Unreal. He's an old school wrestler. He doesn't like us. The content creators, the podcasters, the fans, whatever you want to call us, knowing the behind the scenes of what's going on in WWE, how this is being made, what the conversations are. And in 2026, that's a big thing. So I could have he didn't I could see why he initially, would turn this down. Um but it's a very popular series, and at the same time, like he said, right, he's still alive to tell his story. He is the founder of TNA, and TNA is still alive and talked about in a negative way some most of the time, but they had a strong 2025 in my opinion, and Jeff Jarrett is the creator of that. So I think it's very important we that he was able to tell his story while he's still here. So I love that. Again, emotional watch. Also salute to Jeff Jarrett. Um, Again, he dealt with his alcoholism. Um, Him meeting Karen, which I'm gonna save that because I'm going to talk about the kind of, in my opinion, the juicy stuff of what I've seen, and it's a lot in that second part. So I want to talk about Vince Russo because he's still around today, where he does Coach and Bro with Jonathan Coachman, the Russo brand, and all this stuff. And I like hearing his stories because I do think he is, he does tell it like it is. He might not tell the truth, but when I mean tell it like it is, I do think he tells the truth without telling the whole truth. If that makes sense. Obviously, he knows how to cut a promo, so his deliverance is a big thing. But there was a lot of disagreements, especially with him and Cornette. Cornette talked about it, where when Russo was eventually given power, it was a lot of Shark Boy in the fucking hospital bed, which I remember. I remember the Shark Boy storylines where they had the fucking family and they had Brother Shark and reuniting with this fan. I forget who the fuck he was feuding with at the time, but that was the whole angle. That was awful television. There was a lot of disagreements. Again, DIXIE and um, Vince Russo. There was a lot of things going on. And it was, again, a lot had to do with Jeff Jarrett exiting from TNA, which we're going to get I'm going to get into that on why he exited TNA or why DIXIE kind of pushed him to the corner, you know, during his last few years there at TNA. But Vince Russo, again, he's entertaining as shit. I can't always tell if he's telling the whole truth, but he was a big part of TNA's creative for a while there. So it was just dumb when they brought Eric Bischoff and Hogan. It was literally WCW 2.0 at that point. It's like, what the fuck, DIXIE? You should have known. If Jeff was still there, he would have told you. If Jeff had the real creative input at the last word, he would have said, DIXIE, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. You know why TNA was there's a difference between being successful and still being there, in my opinion. TNA in 2026 is there, but it's not successful. They've had a successful year last year. Nothing taking credit away from that. I was at Slammiversary at the UBS Arena with Kev for, part of the Sports Jedi Network. We were there, and we were there for the covering for our channel. And I was like, oh, they're going to, now I know why they're still alive. But you know why they keep having the LOL TNA? Is because when you look at AEW, let's take a look at AEW. Or let's take a look at back then. So you had WWE, WWF, and ECW. When you had WWE, who was running it? Any names? Am I allowed to say his name without getting canceled? His name was Vince McMahon. When ECW was at its peak, who was running it? Who was the boss? Paul Heyman. Why do you think WCW died so early? Now, again, ECW's no longer around too. But, and obviously WCW was bigger. There's no question about that. But here's my thing. Here's my point. It was ran by one person, and you looked at WCW, you had Bischoff, you had fucking Russo, you had Ted Turner, and whoever the fuck. You look at 2026, you have WWE, you have Triple H answering to all these fucking people above him. You have Carlos Silva, who I respect and really I love Carlos Silva. I think he's a great dude, and I think he's fucking awesome. But he is also answering to people. He is being a yes man. Tony Khan is doing it all on himself. In my opinion, that could be a good or bad thing. But in wrestling history, the way I just broke that down, TNA has constantly been, well, this person's head of creative, but I got the last say because I hold the title, whether it's the president or the CEO or whatever, and I'm doing the business, I'm making the money. So ultimately, I want to pick. You know what? If I tell you Jeff Hardy's gonna win the fucking Impact Championship, he's gonna win the Impact Championship. And I don't give a fuck if that's in your creative or not. That has been a constant thing since Dixie Carter, from Scott D'Amore and Anthem. It's been the same shit. Even Jeff Jarrett colliding with his own fucking father when TNA launched in his early days. That has constantly been a thing. WWE, it's all been Vince until recently, right? ECW was all Heyman until it went down to the ground by itself. Just take the WWE for example, and the biggest machine in the world It's the same thing, except TNA has had that problem since day fucking one. Now, before we talk about the Dixie Carter, the Karen Angles, on what happened, let's hear from our partners at G Fuel. This is the official sponsor of PGHChrisTV. G Fuel user promo code PGHChrisTV to save yourself, or PGHChris, excuse me, to save yourself 20% off our products. We just had a 4th of July sale going on, which should be, and it's either ended or quickly ending, so make sure you guys go get your tubs. If you don't believe me, let's hear from our sponsor. All right, quick time out in today's video. I want to talk to you guys about our sponsor, G Fuel Energy. If you're anything like me, you're locked in for late nights, breaking down games, watching wrestling, gaming, or just grinding content and coffee isn't cutting it anymore, this is where G Fuel comes in. No sugar, no crash, just clean energy that keeps you focused on pregame all the way through overtime. Whether I'm live, recording, or locked in the slate of games, G Fuel keeps me going. They've got a ridiculous lineups of flavors, collaborations, and a whole other group of well-known content creators a part of the movement, so you're definitely going to find one that hits. This is legit energy for creators, gamers, and sports fans who don't slow down. Use promo code PGHChris when you check out. It saves you money and supports the channel, which you guys know I appreciate more than ever. Again, that's G Fuel Energy /PGHChris, or use my promo code PGHChris for 20% off checkout. Now, let's get back into the video. Shout out to G Fuel Energy, again, the official sponsor, partner here for PGHChrisTV. All right, guys, let's get into the juicy stuff, shall we? Jeff Jarrett, Karen, Dixie Carter in general. I'm going to start off with this. Everyone's always, I'm going to call some people out. And I don't know if this is going, I might not even know the dude's even fucking handle. If I could find this guy's handle, I'm going to pull him up on the screen right now, and I'm going to call some, I'm going to do some, I'm going to be bad guy for a second. All right. First off, all these TNA fans. Now, I'm going to be specific. Exhibit A, right? Gerard from False Finish. You, my friend, are odd. I'm calling out all the TNA fans that say they're TNA fans. They're either glazers or they just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That was number one. Gerard. I'm not going to go individually in these people. I'm just going to tell you, I think I had this guy muted, but this guy's fucking annoying. Where these TNA glazers, ever since this Dark Side of the Ring came up. Oh, okay. Anthony, this guy right here. Here's another one. I'm talking to you too. It's easy to criticize in hindsight, but history deserves balance. At TNA, DIXIE helped keep TNA alive through years when many thought another major wrestling promotion couldn't survive. She gave countless wrestlers, announcers, referees, and behind-the-scenes staff opportunities to earn a living, while introducing fans to unforgettable moments and future legends. No run is simply perfect, but without DIXIE's commitment, much of TNA's legacy simply doesn't exist. She deserves far more credit than she receives. Anthony, you are a dumbass. You, my friend, are just copying and pasting what Karen Jarrett said in Dark Side of the Ring when you say she doesn't deserve enough credit. Let's talk about your thing right here, because I'm talking about Dixie Carter. Chat, this is where the fuck I was going. It's easy to criticize in hindsight, but history deserves balance. All right, DIXIE helped keep TNA alive through the years when many thought another major wrestling promotion couldn't survive. Let's stop right there. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. And you heard Matt Hardy say this in Dark Side of the Ring. You've heard a few, D'Lo Brown, you've heard a few people say, well, DIXIE, she's done nothing to me. She's paid me. First off, no shit that Matt Hardy, you had fucking Matt Hardy, who is still with TNA right now on Dark Side of the Ring. You really think that Matt Hardy is going to say anything? At least Karma kept it. Awesome Kong is the only fucking person that kept it real about DIXIE in this entire Dark Side of the Ring documentary. She didn't know what she was doing. The only thing she knew, and the only thing that she brought to the wrestling business during that time, was her fucking wallet. Was her Panda Energy bank account. That was the only reason why she kept TNA alive through the years, and why another quote-unquote major wrestling company couldn't survive. It's because she was the fucking original Tony Khan. It's that simple. Dixie Carter is the original Tony Khan. So I will agree with that. She kept it alive, but it wasn't because of her creative thoughts. It wasn't because she was this businesswoman who was so good and knew what she was doing. It was because she was her father was stupid rich. All right. Let's go to his second sentence. She gave countless wrestlers, announcers, referees, and behind-the-scenes staff opportunities to earn a living. Wow. Let's stop right there, because the next line is complete, utter bullshit. So she gave countless wrestlers, announcers, referees, and behind-the-scenes staff opportunities to earn a living, yada, yada. Again, she had the bank account to do so. I'm not going to highlight that as a flaw of hers, right? But at the same time, she didn't give opportunities to fucking nobody. She hired a bunch of ex-WCW, WWE guys that were getting fucking laid off at the time, thinking that they could help her get to where she wanted to be. DIXIE wanted to be in charge. DIXIE wanted to be the woman in power, not just in wrestling, but she wanted to show her father, Panda Energy, whoever the fuck, that she was, in what we call in 2006 him, but in this case, she was her. That is what Dixie Carter's goal was. It wasn't to give wrestlers opportunities. It wasn't to give these fucking What major ring announcer do you guys remember from TNA? What major referees that haven't been fucking recycled through WCW, ECW, and WWE do you remember in TNA? What behind the scenes staff earn a living? Okay, I'm not going to disclose that one. Sure, if you're a fucking production guy, if you're a talent relations guy, if you're one of these people, I'm not going to come at you. You have nothing to do with what's going on. You're there getting a paycheck and doing your job. Salute. I've dealt with TNA executives and talent for the last year and a half. So I think I have a little bit of knowledge on what the fuck I'm talking about. If you don't believe me, check out Sports Jedi Network in the description below. We are now on our new YouTube channel at Sports Jedi Media Network, which we will get into. I will link all that in the description down below. But the opportunity thing is utter bullshit. She was recycling people that she thought that could help, that already had a fucking name. It's not like she made AJ Styles. It's not like she gave AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, all these fucking people opportunities. They were already there. They were already fucking there. While introducing fans to unforgettable moments and future legends. What future legends came under the Dixie Carter regime that were not, again, already future legends before they got there. What unforgettable moments do you guys remember with the fucking shitty booking that was going on behind the scenes because of all of the back and forth between Cornette, Russo, Scott D'Amore, whoever the fuck it was? What unforgettable moments do you remember? That point in Impact or TNA was fucking garbage. No one is perfect, of course. But without Dixie's commitment, much of TNA's legacy simply doesn't exist. My friend, she is not going to fuck you. She's not going to fuck you. Anyway, so that's my thing on Dixie Carter. To start off, I'm not even fucking done. Let's talk about Karen Jarrett and Dixie Carter and Jeff Jarrett, right? Let's talk about that whole thing. How do I want to tackle this? First off, I think look, I it would have been obviously for ratings and obviously for television and for all that stuff, right? It would have been great to see and hear what Kurt Angle had to say because, like I said earlier in this video, I think they focused a lot on Kurt Angle, especially in the second part in that 10 o'clock hour, where they focused a lot on Karen Jarrett and Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett. So Karen Jarrett gets on. And I'm like, holy shit. First off, I don't care if she has Botox or whatever the fuck. Karen Jarrett is still fine as shit. She wasn't okay, I was a kid. And when I look back, she wasn't that pretty back in those early days. But she's fine now. I'm gonna just say that right now. It showed it spent a lot of time on Jeff Jarrett's relationship with Karen. And they explained that by 2009, Karen and Kurt, their marriage had already fallen apart, where Karen says in the documentary that the marriage was over and that she and Jeff became, romantically involved. She says that people in TNA, including Dixie Carter and Vince Russo, knew the reality of the situation, even though the public narrative became much messier, where Karen talks about, people were talking about that there was an affair. She started off with saying, I think it's funny how people are saying that me and Kurt were still together when they weren't. Some of the boys in the locker room were like, what's going on? But, they didn't really know. But Karen, she claimed that everybody knew that Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett had either filed for divorce, one of the divorce process was already going on, or it had already been finalized. So, Kurt Angle's reaction, I mean, look, they don't really talk much about it because he's not there. And I want to see if there's any. I wonder if Kurt Angle has said anything on the dark side of the ring. Has he commented on why he's not involved? I don't think so. So, yeah, he there's no comment or anything on why he wasn't, involved. Was he asked to be involved? I'm sure he was asked to be involved. There's no fucking way he wasn't. But it was a difficult divorce. Again, Kurt was going through a lot of, the Perk Angle era. Family and custody issues, and it was they turned it into a storyline, which I'm very upset that they did it a little bit, because in the documentary they revisit how TNA later on turned the real life situation into an on-screen feud with Jeff and Kurt. The personal issues became the basis for one of TNA's biggest storylines, including Karen's return to TV. in a highly publicized Karen or excuse me, Jeff Jarrett and Kurt Angle rivalry because it was so real, and Karen hadn't been on TV for a long time, and she was involved with this. I remember watching the segment. It was a vignette segment where Kurt Angle. I remember it like it was yesterday. All right, this was back in like 2000 whatever. I don't remember. I think it was like 2007, 2008. Where Kurt Angle is sitting on he's on the left screen, and it's like Orlando, Florida, or Atlanta, wherever the fuck they were shooting that day. And it was Karen from their home in Pittsburgh, or her home in Pittsburgh, because she's from Pittsburgh as well. And it's just them arguing about each other, and it's them like, I gave you, or Kurt's like, I gave you everything. Like I was just like, remember watching it as a kid, and like, what the fuck? Like, it was like Edge and Lita, but much more intense because this involved marriage and children, and there was really behind the scenes shit going on where it's like, it wasn't like the WWE where it was like, okay, TNA was much more of a small locker room, you could say, so the word would get out much quicker, right? And you know, yada yada, all that stuff. But that, again, they noted while the angle, it got attention, they blurred the line between reality and entertainment in a way that, it made a lot of people uncomfortable, um, which rightfully so. But this is the part where I go back to Dixie Carter, right? So according to Jeff Jarrett and D'Lo Brown and Karen. So Dixie believed that the relationship was a major distraction for business, which she's a fucking hypocrite because they made it into an angle. She said money. She said, "Oh, no." She was upset because she was the last person to find out, according to Jeff Jarrett, and they weren't hiding it. Or no, according to Vince Russo, because Vince Russo said she called him screaming and cutting like a shoot style promo. Well, it's like, how could nobody have told me that Karen and Jeff were together? They showed up at a party when she opened the door. Karen and Jeff were hosting it. So she believed it was a major distraction, and she allegedly felt, Jeff's position as the founder and executive was no longer tenable because of the backstage tension. So she essentially, removed him from those roles. And he was forced out of the company that he created. That's what happened. That's why Dixie Carter, in my opinion, is evil. Karen is very critical of Dixie in the documentary. She said, and I quote, I wrote it down. She said, and I quote, Dixie Carter nuked Jeff Jarrett's whole life by how she handled the situation and removed him from power. Look, only Karen really knows what went on back then, and Jeff and Dixie. But from watching this documentary, from Dixie not participating, I think Karen has a point. She pushed the guy out of the company that he founded, that he created, his baby, because she came in with the financial control, and she knew that, you got to say no to you can't say no to me. She had him by the fucking balls. It was unfortunate. But again, this was a very well put together Dark Side of the Ring part 1 and 2. Episode 3 will cover, I think, his road to rehab, entering rehab, his struggles with alcoholism, bringing in Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan. They're going to talk about, I guess, Dixie's departure, and all that stuff, because they kind of left off, or they kind of did like a cliffhanger thing where they it was like Hawk and Eric and whatever, and they were like next week on Dark Side of the Ring. So, chat, it's going to be a interesting Tuesday. We will be back here. I might talk about it again. Don't forget to follow our brand new YouTube channel over on the Sports Jedi Network. Our old one, it's still up there. You guys can still watch our archives, our VODs. Um, but until we get that situated out with YouTube, I just want to show you guys where you guys can go support us. You guys can go right here. Again, everything will be linked into the description. But it's important that I share this with you guys now so you guys can take a look at what's going on. And bam, let's talk about right here. We got the new channel right here, the Sports Jedi Media Network at Sports Jedi Media. Again, this is our new channel here that we are working to build back up. Again, you can still go here. This is our main channel, 17.8K. It's a challenging grind. It's going to be a challenging grind, but hey, you guys showed a lot of love and support. I know we can count on you guys to do the same thing and follow us on this crazy, streaming journey. Go follow all of us, man. All of us, Sports Jedi Network. I'm gonna again pull the new YouTube here in a second. Shout out to Aaron who was live not that long ago. But yes, shout out to Bob. Go follow my guy Bob. Red Hot Steelers takes will be back soon. Um, Steelers football news will be back soon, but you guys can go here again. And follow for more. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for checking out this Dark Side of the Ring little rant or coverage or whatever the fuck you want to call this. I have been PGHChrisTV. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, like, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at PGHChrisTV. New videos will be up every other day. Live streams will be on Tuesdays, Fridays, when football season's back, Sundays, and I'm trying to figure out one more day, but definitely Tuesdays and Sundays. We will be live tomorrow for weekly wrestling, and I will be live Sunday afternoon here to chit chat and talk about whatever is going on. Thank you guys so much. See you in the next one.